Welcome. In this section, we would talk about down to earth the 30 important topics for this year. So, we would be discussing those one by one. The summary of the topics have been mentioned here. So, the first one is liberalization. Now, under the PV Narasimha Rao's government, liberalization was the idea that was propounded. But with liberalization comes a great pressure on the natural resources. So, to increase the economic activity, each inch of the space would be utilized, and this would lead to pressure onto the environmental resources and lead to ecological destruction. The next is industrial development and market oriented agriculture. Now, agriculture in India primarily has been for subsistence. However, with Western countries and the demand for exports growing, we need to understand that our policies should be oriented in such a way that there are more exports which could be offered. Now, for exports, if the currency is devalued, then the resources would become cheaper, and as a result, there are twofold things. Like, if we are importing certain resources for the purpose of agriculture, if the currency is devalued there, we get a benefit. But if our currency gets devaluated, we get benefit in terms of cheaper exports that could be provided. But overall, the import burden would increase. So definitely devaluation would not be a good way out of this problem. But one important thing out of it is that when we are talking about industry oriented agriculture, rather than subsistence agriculture, this would again have an impact, a deeper impact onto the environment. The next is management of natural resources. Now, natural resource management is an important aspect, because one good aspect we would talk about here is the Dunkel Draft. Now, the attack on the Bangalore Seed Company is one such example when we talk about globalization of agriculture, moving from GATE to WTO, and the patents being filed for the plants and the genes. We have seen that the demands for various proposals and the rejection by the multinational seed company Cargill, the rejection of the proposals have taken place. So, what the farmers might lose as part of this is very important to understand. So, Dunkel Draft reduces the subsidies for the farmers, and this is globally, but it benefits the farmers in India, and so that they can compete in the international market. Now, as per the National Council for Applied Economic Research, Indian farmer earn 97 rupees for every 100 rupees that they could have earned in a free trade framework. So, there is a very important reason to improve the things from our end. The next is Indigenous Rights. Now, there are various communities. For example, Australian Aboriginals are an important community, and a law proposes that they have been criticized by the country's business community, that there could be fears that it would curb the mining status. Now, for this, there has been legislation being brought, and the Mabo judgment is one of the important ones. So, similarly, native Australians under the Eddie Mabo, which is from the Mariam tribe in the Murray Island, is an important case study that we need to know. Now, this decision has been important in terms of land ownership in Australia. So, the bill and the related decision, how there is racism, how Aboriginals were treated as second citizens. So, all those comes into this line. The next is, in India, wildlife protection is another important concern. So, Gir Sanctuary, 1,000 kilometers away from it, is Shiopur Sanctuary, where the recent animals have been brought, and the idea here is to understand that nearly 100 years back, lions were shot in that area, and introduction of cheetah back in that area is an indicative that we are trying to actually maintain the economic structure. But in process of maintaining that, there is increased number of government vehicles which are seen on those areas, which is again affecting the exclusivity of the region. The next is right to information. Now, under the right to information, we have seen specifically in the areas of Biawar, in the Ajmer district, there was right to inspect development related document, and similar development related document scanning have been taken place in other parts as well. Now, corruption and maintaining corruption-free country is a very important indicator. US, Japan, South Korea are some of the leading countries, most dynamic, which have been riddled with corruption, but still the corruption scandals are not going up to the hierarchy. So, despite high level of corruptions, the governance is good and continues to work, and the same should be the case with India as well. Now, the next is vulture population. We have seen that the amount of toxins in the body of vulture have increased, and as a result, the population of vultures have declined. Now, the important components in the body that are found are DDT, HCH, and BHC. All of these lead to implications on human beings. Now, when vulture population decreases, what would happen? The carcass of the cattle won't be consumed, and this would again create environmental issues. Now, mustard cake is used as a cattle feed, and then we have seen that villagers are cultivating these mustards on using huge number of pesticides. Now, these pesticides go into the body of higher order organism. They start to accumulate, and this leads to serious implications onto the organisms. The next is the dam, the Narmada River conflict that was seen. So, Sardar Sarovar Dam was, the construction rules were cleared in 2000. The construction was stopped in 1994 in the light of Narmada Bachao Andolan by Medha Patkar. And later on, we had seen that the project was delayed, and finally this verdict was passed, but ultimately it displaced huge number of villages, mainly from Madhya Pradesh. The next is ecological poverty. Now, ecological poverty is more detrimental than economic poverty, which economists actually take into light. One of the three states that we consider here would be Uttaranchal, Chhattisgarh, and Jharkhand, which have been created, and the idea was that they need to be ecologically preserved because of their natural resources, because of their natural bestowed resources. They need to have a separate entity, and it was not because of the economic reasons. The next is biodiversity. Now, the Convention on Biodiversity was signed in 1992. Then there was a Biodiversity Act in 2002, and this is an idea to understand that there have been various authorities, but the idea is managing the national biodiversity, recognizing the benefits out of the community's traditional knowledge, and sharing that with the people. The next is resolution of conflict. Now, there has always been a constant tussle between natural resource management and human beings. So, Nagaland Ownership of Transfer of Lands and Resources Act actually talks about the mining only within the state's approval. Now, this has come up with various versions, but finally, the thing was, it was enacted in 1957 and adopted in 1963, and this, under the union government sources, say that constitution has the power to make laws regarding the practices for land and resources. The next is environmental movement. Now, Bhopal gas tragedy, Chipko movement are some of the major ones to cite, and then we have seen that the reverse of the butterfly cycle, where ugly caterpillars are being found, and they are basically the uninstitutionalized democratic pillars. Now, under the People's Union for Civil Liberty, which is a non-governmental organization, we have understood the idea of criminalization of politics. Now, none of the above option on an electoral voting machine is an idea to understand that there is a probability that you don't approve any of the political parties and you select the option of none of the above. The next is Niyamgiri Hills, which is a significance for cultural and religious rights of the people, focuses on people's forest rights and how the histories actually change. Another important topic is GM crops, genetically modified crops. Now, GM seeds are not on a concurrent list, and therefore states don't have a right to create legislation regarding it. However, Andhra Pradesh has cited that the deaths of the cattle has been due to Bt cotton toxins, and it is believed that the Bt cotton requires high amount of nitrates, hydrogen cyanide, and organophosphates, which are one of the reasons for the death of the cattle in those areas. So again, these there are pressure on the court to allow companies to actually work here, but they are proving detrimental to the local flora and the fauna of the region. The land acquisition is again important. So, Taluka of the Raigad area took part in a referendum on Mumbai Special Economic Zone. Majority voted against it, and then there were issues regarding the official statistics. So, nearly 6,000 farmers, over 3,000 hectares of land in 22 villages voted for it, and the verdict was against the special economic zone which was established. The next is Bhopal gas tragedy. Now, the region 3 kilometers within the Union Carbide factory has 40 times higher pesticides level. Now, three important pesticides which are manufactured are carbaryl, edicar, and carbaryl and gamma hexachlorocyclohexane. Now, all of them have higher amounts of mercury, chromium, and they have persistent toxicity. Now, the soil samples have been found with high proportions of lindane, chromium, mercury, and the surface water samples were again of a higher amount of pesticides that were found. Now, organochlorides actually are those pesticides which lead to cancers and bone defect, and they damage the liver as well as the blood cells of the body. The next is Manrega. Manrega is a scheme through which 100 days of guaranteed employment is being provided. Now, nationwide rural employment providing scheme, and this scheme has been working for last 5 years, asking people to build tanks, ponds, revive the traditional water conservation systems, and through that there has been a huge number of development in the rural areas. In the terms of mining, we would be now replacing the existing Mines and Minerals Development Regulation Act of 1957 by the 2011 Act. The idea is the coal companies must share their net profit of 26% every year with the affected community. Now, this would actually have a good impact onto the local area development. However, the calculations are not including the minor minerals, so they should also include the minor minerals as well. The next is population. Now, fertility, total fertility rate, we are at 2.5. We aim to bring it down to 2.1. However, the regions like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar have extremely high numbers of total fertility rate. In Bihar, the available couples for contraception are nearly 4 lakh. However, only 1% of it are willing to go for permanent contraception, and therefore there is a lot of issue in terms of population and the rising pressure onto the natural resources. The next is UN strategy for disaster reduction says for the third consecutive year, the UN has borne a loss of nearly $100 billion, and that is only contributed to extreme weather events across the world, and therefore there should be some institutional mechanisms to bring this to end. The next is the politics. And in this, we have seen the various schemes. Manrega is a good scheme. Then you have Ujjwala scheme, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Jan Dhan Yojana, the replacement of Planning Commission by Niti Aayog. Some of those have proved to be life-changing. Now, here is one example of free gas connection. The first woman, Seema Devi, from the Balia district of Uttar Pradesh, who got this free gas connection. And then there are various other BPL families who are getting the benefit of it. The zoonotic diseases have been rising throughout the country and specifically attributed to extreme weather conditions. Nipah virus is one of the viruses which have been found in the foothills of Western Ghats and have exposed the healthcare system of Kerala and the problems associated to it. Nearly 75% of the new diseases that we are being affected from are because of animal origin, and therefore is again a major concern. The next is India Open Defecation Free Nation is a project that we want to declare by the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. The idea was to make the country open defecation free, where nearly 60% of the population defecates in open. The next is the health emergency, the issue of the corona pandemic and a huge number of people being affected by it, bringing out the loopholes in the medical and the healthcare infrastructure system, and what if and when if the next pandemic like this could strike. The next is climate change. Now, climate change, the physical basis for science, is the verdict which has been passed under the sixth assessment report of UN IPCC, and this talks about the humans playing an important role in triggering the weather events, mainly the changing patterns, the rising sea levels, climate change, and therefore the rising temperature which are to be maintained at 1.5 degrees Celsius, rising up to 2 degrees Celsius by the middle of the century. Again, there have been conflicts over land acquisition and water harvesting, water sharing. India signed WTO, and then since then to 2021 we have seen the longest farmer agitation in India, and under the fifth schedule we protect the rights of the indigenous community in the tribal areas of 10 states. Right to information has been demanded by Tamil Nadu, Goa and Rajasthan. There have been nationalization of the resources which have taken place, and LPG connections, as we already discussed, Manrega scheme, the projects under water, sanitation and hygiene are some of the important aspects which we have covered in the separate lectures. So this was about the down to earth coverage. The handouts for the same would be available on exam race. Don't miss those. Very, very important, and a quick summary for you to revise for the last moment. Wish you very good luck for your preparation. Thanks for joining in. Have a wonderful day ahead.